single dad sold his car to buy his daughter a birthday cake. What happened next shocked the town. The wind rattled the loose sign above the old bakery on the corner of Pine and 6th as Ethan Cole stood across the street, hands buried in the pockets of his worn jacket. His car, a faded silver sedan with more miles than he cared to count, sat parked at the curb behind him. It was the only thing he owned of real value, though even calling it valuable felt generous. Still, he had spent years keeping it alive with duct tape fixes and late-night prayers, because it was the thing that got him to his jobs, and sometimes, when his daughter was feeling sad, it was the car that carried them to the beach so she could breathe ocean air again. But today, he wasn't looking at the car. He was looking at the bakery window, where rows of pink and white cakes sat under soft golden lights. A little bell chimed every time someone walked through the door. It was warm in there. It looked like another world. He rubbed at the ache in his chest. Tomorrow was Sophie's 7th birthday, and there would be no presents, no balloons, not even candles, unless he found a way. He checked his wallet again, as if hoping the numbers had changed. 3 crumpled dollar bills and a bus ticket stub. He'd spent most of his last paycheck on rent and the electric bill, hoping to keep the lights on a few more weeks. He had picked up an extra shift at the auto shop, but the owner had been clear there was no overtime pay this month. Ethan had nodded quietly and gone back to changing brake pads, pretending it didn't matter. But tonight, when Sophie had fallen asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, she had murmured, half dreaming, "Do you think the cake will have sprinkles this time?" And something in him had cracked. He stepped off the curb and crossed the street, not toward the bakery, but toward the pawn shop 2 doors down. The bell above the door let out a tired jingle when he pushed it open. Marty, the owner, looked up from behind the counter, his glasses perched at the end of his nose, and he had the kind of expression that suggested he had seen every flavor of desperation come through his door. "Evening, Ethan," he said slowly. "What brings you here?" "The car," Ethan said, his voice rough. "How much would you give me for it?" Marty blinked. "The sedan? Ethan, that thing's older than both of us." "Just give me a number," Ethan said. There was a long pause. Marty set down his pen and walked to the window. They stood side by side, looking at the car. Finally, Marty sighed. 500, maybe. I'll have to tow it in a month when it dies on me." "Done," Ethan said. "You sure about this? How are you going to get to work?" "I'll figure it out," Ethan said quietly. The transaction was quick and quiet. When Ethan walked back out onto the street, his hands were empty, except for the envelope of cash and the keys he dropped into Marty's palm without looking. The car door slammed one last time behind him, and the sound echoed in his chest like something closing. He walked 3 blocks to the bakery. The warmth hit him like a soft wave when he opened the door. The smell of sugar and vanilla wrapped around him. The woman behind the counter smiled. Her name tag read, "Carla. Can I help you?" "A birthday cake," Ethan said. "For my daughter. She's turning 7. "That's sweet," Carla said, pulling a notepad closer. "What kind of cake?" Ethan hesitated. "The kind with sprinkles." Her smile widened. "We've got just the thing, and we can write her name on it too." "What's her name?" "Sophie." He spelled it out carefully, as though it were the most precious word he had. When she brought out the cake 20 minutes later, Ethan stared at it like it was made of gold. It was small, round, covered in pink frosting with rainbow sprinkles scattered like confetti. Her name, curved across the top in soft white script, $28, Carla said gently. He handed over the cash, trying not to let his fingers tremble. When she boxed the cake, she wrapped it in a bright ribbon and tucked a tiny candle inside for free. "Tell Sophie happy birthday from me," she said. He walked home through the chilly night with the cake cradled like something fragile. His apartment was quiet, a single bedroom over a laundromat that hummed softly below. Sophie was asleep, her stuffed rabbit falling from her arm. Ethan placed the cake on the tiny kitchen table, sat down beside it, and pressed his palms to his eyes. He had no car now. He would have to take buses to both of his jobs, and that meant waking before dawn. He would have to walk Sophie to school through the dark morning cold. But tomorrow she would have a cake. She would have candles. She would know she mattered. The thought steadied him. He didn't notice the figure standing at the open stairwell door. Mrs. Henson, their elderly neighbor, had come up to ask about a flickering hallway light, but she stopped when she saw the cake on the table, the wariness in Ethan's shoulders, and the way he exhaled like a man trying not to break. She said nothing then, just quietly went back downstairs, though her mind was already turning. Ethan didn't know that by morning, half the building would be whispering about what he had done. He only knew he had bought his daughter a cake. Morning slipped in as a pale stripe under the blinds. Ethan woke before the alarm and listened to the laundromat humming below and the slow breaths from the bedroom. The pink cake sat on the table like a small sunrise. He made weak coffee, cut a crooked banner from a grocery bag, and printed "Happy Birthday" in careful block letters. When Sophie padded out in socks and bed hair, she stopped at the table and pressed both hands to her mouth. "For me?" she whispered. "For you," he said. He set 2 candles, struck a match, and shielded the flames with his palm. She closed her eyes, wished, and blew. Smoke curled in the quiet kitchen. They ate thin slices on paper plates. Frosting dotted her nose. "This cake tastes like Saturday," she declared. "What does Saturday taste like?" he asked. "Like nothing hurts," she said, and licked a sprinkle from her finger. He walked her to school, through wind that cut, but sky that shone. Henson met them near the corner with a paper crown she had cut from an old magazine. "For the birthday queen," she said. Sophie bowed and giggled. "You're doing fine," Mrs. Henson murmured. At the classroom door, Ms. Daniels knelt to Sophie's height. "That crown is perfect," she said, and ushered her in. Then the teacher looked at Ethan. "How are you getting to work without the car?" she asked gently. "Buses," he said. "And shoes." She nodded. "Our parents' group helps with rides. If you're open, I'll ask." He swallowed pride and nodded. "Thank you," he said. He caught a bus to the auto shop and arrived 6 minutes late. The manager frowned. "This can't keep happening," he said. "It won't," Ethan answered. He works steady, hands black with dust, mind drifting to candles and crowns. At lunch, he checked his phone. There was a photo of Sophie in her crown from an unknown number and a text from Miss Daniels. Parents can help with rides and pickup. Then a link to a neighborhood forum with a headline that tightened his chest. Single dad sold his car to buy his daughter a birthday cake. He hadn't told anyone but Marty at the pawn shop. He opened the thread. Someone wrote, "I saw him hand over the keys." Another, "I watched him carry the cake like it was glass." Another, "My kid is in Sophie's class. They could use rides." Heat rose in his face. Shame and relief wrestled, and neither won. Being seen could heal you or bruise you. In early afternoon, he stepped outside to breathe cold air. A small van pulled up. Carla from the bakery hopped out with 2 bags. "Mrs. Henson came for cupcakes," she said. She said Sophie glowed like a lamp. "I brought extras for tonight." She pressed the bags into his hands. "And this," she added, giving him a folded paper. "From my brother at the bus depot. For the man who sold his car for sprinkles." Inside was a monthly pass. "Please thank him," Ethan managed. "Tell him yourself," Carla said. "He's at the depot till 6. After work, he took the bus to school. Sophie sprinted out with her crown bent and a grin that could bend light. "We sang," she said. "Miss Daniels drew a star next to my name. I can draw one with 5 lines." "Show me later," he said. On the sidewalk, a woman from the parents' group approached. "I'm Leah," she said. "I can take Sophie in the mornings this week. My son Ty says she tells good jokes." "Only the good ones," Sophie said. They walked home slow. The evening smelled like something sweet he couldn't name. At their door, a brown envelope was taped beside the knob. Inside was a note in careful print. "For Sophie's books. Happy birthday." 2 bookstore gift cards slid into his hand like small birds. Inside the apartment, they ate leftovers with bakery cookies and called it a feast. Sophie drew a 5-line star and taped it to the fridge. "Can I wear the crown to sleep?" she asked. "It might poke," he said. "Let it guard you from the nightstand." "Crowns are good guards," she agreed. When she slept, he sat at the table, turning the bus pass like a coin. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. A measured voice filled the tiny kitchen. "Mr. Cole, this is Deputy Mayor Alvarez. I would like to meet tomorrow about a matter concerning you and your daughter. Please come to Town Hall at 4. Downstairs, washers thumped a steady rhythm. He thought of the forum thread, the envelope, strangers building a bridge under their feet. Bridges were good until they led somewhere you hadn't planned to go. He washed cups, tied the trash, checked the window lock. In the quiet, the apartment felt smaller and also wider. Like a room where a door had opened to a hallway he had never noticed. He stood in Sophie's doorway and watched her sleep with the crown on the nightstand, like a tiny guard. The next day would need new routes, earlier mornings, and a conversation he did not understand. He turned off the light and felt the world tilt, a little, toward something he could not yet name. He breathed slow, counted blessings, and trusted night to hold. The morning came with thin sunlight and the smell of toast. Sophie sat cross-legged at the table in her pajamas, crown lopsided, coloring a picture of a star on a birthday cake. Ethan buttered the last 2 slices of bread and poured orange juice into a chipped mug. "Big meeting today," he said casually, though his stomach had been tight since the voicemail. "Can I come?" she asked. "Not this one," he said gently. "School is your meeting." She nodded solemnly, as though the two were equally serious. Leah knocked at 7:30 sharp. Her son Ty bouncing at her side. "Carpool ready," she said brightly. Sophie grabbed her backpack, crown still on. Ethan knelt and whispered, "Be brave." She whispered back, "Always." When the door shut behind them, the apartment felt too quiet. He dressed in his best shirt, the one without threadbare elbows, and tucked the bus pass into his wallet. Work passed in blurs of engines and grease, though every hour seemed to pull him toward 4 o'clock. At lunch, Mrs. Henson appeared at the shop door with a small paper bag. "Carla sent muffins," she said, "and told me to tell you, heroes eat carbs." He laughed despite himself. "Tell her I'm barely a mechanic." "Barely mechanics raise stars," she replied, and left him blinking. At 3:30, he caught the crosstown bus, clutching the envelope of bookstore cards as though they were credentials. Town Hall loomed pale against the winter sky. Inside, the marble echoed every step like it was judging him. The receptionist led him to a small conference room where Deputy Mayor Alvarez waited. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her hair and sharp eyes softened by something he couldn't name. "Mr. Cole," she said, standing to shake his hand. "Thank you for coming." He nodded, unsure what else to say. She gestured to a chair. "You've become something of a local headline." Heat crept up his neck. I didn't mean to. Good deeds rarely mean to, she said. But people noticed. Your story has circulated through the Parents' Council, local press, even our community outreach board. And it made us wonder something. He sat very still. The old Baker Street Community Center closed last year, she continued. We've been searching for a way to revive it. A place for kids, after-school care, tutoring, meals. Funding exists, but we lack someone trusted to oversee it. Someone rooted, humble, persistent. Your neighbors describe you in those words. He blinked. I fix brakes. You raise a child alone, she countered. You sold your car for her happiness. People see that. They trust that. And trust is rarer than funding. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were forms, schedules, and a letter of intent already bearing his name. You wouldn't be alone, she added. There'd be staff, but we need a leader who knows what struggle looks like from the ground. He stared at the folder. He could still smell oil on his fingers. Why me? He asked, finally. Because you understand what matters when everything else falls away, she said. The clock ticked. Outside the window, children crossed the street, clutching parents' hands. He thought of Sophie's crown on the nightstand, her words, like nothing hurts. He imagined her in that dusty, empty building, filling it with drawings and laughter. What about my jobs? He asked quietly. The position is full-time, with benefits, Alvarez said. Stable hours. You'd be home for dinner. The room seemed to tilt. Stability was a language he had forgotten. I need to think, he murmured. Of course. But think quickly. The board votes Monday. She stood and shook his hand again, firm and warm. Whatever you decide, thank you for reminding this town what love looks like. He walked out into sharp air and blinking sunlight. His feet carried him toward the school before he knew it. The bell had just rung, and Sophie barreled through the doors, crown askew, art projects flying from her backpack. We made snowmen, she announced. Ty said mine looked like a marshmallow who got promoted. He laughed and hoisted her bag onto his shoulder. Sounds like leadership material. They stopped at the small park on the way home. Sophie climbed the jungle gym while he sat on the cold bench, watching her silhouette against the orange winter sky. His phone buzzed. A new text from Leah. Community center rumors are true? If yes, say the word. We'll paint it ourselves. Paint it themselves. Strangers, ready to build walls around his daughter's laughter. That night, Sophie spread her books across the kitchen table. Help me spell important, she said. Why that word? He asked. Miss Daniels said write about someone important to you. She chewed her pencil. I picked you. His throat tightened. He spelled slowly while she copied. When she finished, she held it up. My dad is important because he keeps trying, even when things are hard, and he makes birthdays feel like magic. He turned away to rinse a plate, blinking fast. After she slept, he opened the folder under the dim kitchen light. The form stared back, full of boxes and promises. His hands trembled, not from fear of failing, but from fear of hoping. Hope was heavier. But he thought of the quiet building on Baker Street, thought of kids whose fathers had disappeared and mothers who worked nights, of lonely birthdays with no sprinkles. Maybe they could build something where nothing had been. Maybe that was what love did. It turned broken places into homes. He signed the intent letter with steady ink. Sunday came clear and cold on Baker Street, and Ethan stood at the old community center with a borrowed toolbox, a ring of keys, and nerves that hopped like small birds. Sophie held his hand, her paper crown dented from naps. Behind them, Leah rolled paint cans, Mrs. Henson brought a cinnamon thermos, and Carla balanced bakery boxes with a grin. The town had moved like a tide overnight. Someone posted a call for help. Someone else printed flyers. And people answered as if the door had been waiting for them all along. The first lock stuck, then gave. Dust lifted in the thin light. Scuffed floors waited like blank pages. Ethan stepped inside and felt how silence turns to purpose when enough footsteps agree. "We will make this bright," Sophie said, drawing a clean line through dust with her finger. "We will," he answered, and the promise steadied him. Work began with ordinary courage. Marty hauled ladders and cracked jokes until cobwebs seemed to laugh back. Leah handed out gloves and clipboards. Carla passed muffins as if sugar could build walls. Miss Daniels arrived with boxes of books and a voice calm enough to settle weather. Teenagers pried up cracked tiles and clicked new ones into place, like puzzle pieces deciding to belong. An electrician named Roy fixed a trembling light. The radio hummed. When the song ended, hammers spoke. By noon, the hallway gleamed. Sophie and Ty painted a test patch of sky on the long back wall. The blue bled where the plaster drank too fast, but they learned the rhythm and smoothed it. Maya, who drew quiet, added 5-line stars. Ben, who spoke less than he listened, painted a tiny bus in the corner with careful wheels. Ethan climbed and sanded shelves until they no longer snagged at sweaters. He felt the ache in his shoulders and welcomed it. In the afternoon, Deputy Mayor Alvarez arrived in rolled sleeves and laughed when Marty handed her a brush. "Only one rule," he said. "No straight lines unless you mean them." She painted trim the color of butter and listened as Mrs. Daniels described after-school circles. "Homework first, then stories, then games. We can feed the hungry hour between school and dinner," Alvarez said, and the sentence stitched the room into something larger. Word kept traveling. Frank brought chess sets and said he would come Tuesdays. A nurse on break left puzzles by the door with a note that read, "For the quiet kids." A college student offered math on Thursdays. People came not because a headline told them to, but because the door was open and there were clean roads traced in dust. When evening leaned in, the mural began. Sophie drew a tree with generous arms. Ty added a river. Maya set a book big as a door against the trunk. Ben painted a silver car with small wings and parked it by the river as if it could ferry kids from fear to courage. Ethan watched color pour over the wall and felt something untie inside. Monday, the board vote came easy as breath. Alvarez called, voice bright, and said, "Yes, and yes again." The town page posted the news. Messages overflowed. Many were simple. "I can bring snacks. I have time on Fridays. My kid needs a place like this." One note made Ethan sit down. It was from a nurse named Claire, who wrote that long ago, a father thanked her for keeping a newborn safe while a storm howled, and she never forgot how relief looked like prayer. He read it twice and wondered at kindness that traveled like weather and returned as if it knew its way home. Opening day arrived a week later, bright but cold. A line formed before the doors. Kids in puffy coats, parents with tired eyes that lifted when they saw the room. The floors shone. The mural glowed. Tables held books, puzzles, chess sets, crayons, hand sanitizer, and bowls of oranges that made the air smell like sunshine. Carla set a small pink cake with sprinkles in the center of a long table as if to anchor the joy. Sophie squeezed Ethan's fingers. "Are we ready?" she asked. "We are," he said. He unlocked the door. People moved in like a tide that knew its way. Voices braided. A boy pointed at the bus in the mural and said, "That's my ride." Frank opened a chess set. Miss Daniels gathered a ring of readers and began with a first page that sounded like wind in leaves. Leah placed name tags on shy shirts. Marty showed 3 middle schoolers how to sand a splinter from a bench and still follow a story. The room found its rhythm, and it was the sound of many small goods done at once. A man in a transit jacket paused by the cake. "Saw you traded wheels for sprinkles," he said, a smile tucked in his voice. He set a tiny toy car on the table, silver, with painted wings. "For the shelf," he added, "so kids remember that sometimes letting go is a way to arrive." Ethan felt heat behind his eyes and nodded. "We will keep it where everyone can see." Mid-afternoon, snow began, soft and sincere. Kids pressed hands to windows and drew circles in the fog with their breaths. Sophie tugged a sleeve. Sophie smiled. People listened. As the snow drifted softly against the glowing windows, Ethan stood in the doorway of the bustling center, watching Sophie laugh beneath the mural tree. He smiled, not because life had grown easy, but because hope had finally come home, and this time it was here to stay.